The fluorescent lights of my boss Richard's office hummed, a stark contrast to the red fury on his face. He slammed the proposal down on his mahogany desk. Nigh, corrected version. "Who do you think you are, Mark?" he seethed, his voice a low growl. "Making me look like a fool." I met his gaze, my hands steady. "Richard, your numbers were wrong. A $7 million error. I was protecting the client and the firm." He just laughed, a bitter, dismissive sound that echoed off the glass walls. "You're done, Sullivan. Pack your desk. Security will escort you out." He thought it was over. He had no idea that a single email I'd sent an hour ago had already sealed his fate, not mine. The walk back to my desk was a blur of sympathetic, downcast eyes. 15 years. 15 years I had poured into Sterling Vanguard, climbing from a junior analyst fresh out of business school to one of their most trusted senior consultants. My name, Mark Sullivan, was synonymous with integrity here in our Chicago office. I didn't just work for the company, I believed in it. Richard, however, was a recent transplant from the New York office, here only 3 years. He was a creature of pure ambition, a man who saw colleagues not as teammates but as rungs on a ladder. He took credit for every win and masterfully deflected blame for every loss. This $7 million blunder was a direct result of his carelessness, a mistake he tried to rush past me, hoping I wouldn't notice. He saw a quiet, 42-year-old workhorse he could steamroll. He forgot who I reported to on the big accounts. He forgot that I had a direct line to the man who built this empire from the ground up, Jonathan Sterling. And Mr. Sterling, a notoriously meticulous man, hated 2 things above all else: losing money and being lied to. My email, with both versions of the proposal attached, offered him definitive proof of both. My connection to Jonathan Sterling wasn't common knowledge. It wasn't in any HR file. It was a trust forged in fire nearly a decade ago, during the Trident acquisition crisis. Our largest client, a multi-billion-dollar portfolio, was hours from walking away. The VP in charge had been cooking the books, fudging performance projections for 2 straight quarters to hide a series of catastrophic losses. I was just a senior analyst then, but I smelled it. The numbers felt wrong, hollow. I spent 72 hours straight, fueled by black coffee and a cold sense of dread, digging through raw data in a locked conference room. I ignored my own boss, the man who'd blindly signed off on the bad reports, and found it. A deliberate, systemic miscalculation, buried 3 layers deep in the appendices. A lie designed to be invisible. By the time the dust settled, the VP was gone, and I was standing in our main boardroom, presenting my findings directly to Jonathan Sterling himself. He'd flown in from New York on his private jet, his presence sucking all the air out of the room. He listened to my entire breakdown, his eyes like chips of granite, never once interrupting. When I finished, a long silence hung in the air before he finally spoke, his voice quiet but heavy as iron. "The numbers don't lie, Sullivan. People do." He slid a simple, elegant business card across the polished table. "My personal cell. You ever see anything that threatens the integrity of my firm again? You don't climb the ladder. You use the elevator. You call me. Is that understood?" That card had sat in my wallet for 9 years, a silent promise. Richard, of course, knew nothing of this. To him, I was just a fixture, a piece of the office furniture he'd inherited, a quiet, reliable number cruncher he could bully and manipulate. In his 3 years, I'd watched him take sole credit for 3 major account wins that my team had secured. I'd listened to him present my market analyses in executive meetings, passing my insights off as his own spontaneous brilliance. I let the small thefts of credit go. It wasn't worth the fight. But this was different. A $7 million lie to a legacy client wasn't a small theft, it was a cancer. It was a direct existential threat to the firm's integrity. Richard firing me wasn't him winning, it was him walking straight into a trap he never knew existed. My email to Sterling wasn't just an act of revenge, it was me finally using the elevator. The cardboard box sat on my chair, a generic, brown vessel for a 15-year career. My team, the people I'd mentored and fought for, stared at their screens, pretending to be absorbed in spreadsheets that suddenly seemed monumentally important. I didn't blame them. Richard's office had glass walls for a reason. Fear was his preferred management tool. I started packing, a framed photo of my wife and daughter at Navy Pier. A heavy, crystal paperweight from my 10-year anniversary with the firm. A worn copy of Asterisk the Intelligent Investor that had been my Bible since my first day. Each item felt like a small, personal betrayal as it disappeared into the box. This wasn't just my desk. It was a testament to a life I had built within these walls. 2 security guards appeared at the end of the aisle, their posture stiff, their presence a public declaration of my shame. One of them, a man named Dave I'd shared coffee with in the lobby 100 times, wouldn't meet my eyes. "Ready when you are, Mark," he said, his voice low and apologetic. As I taped the box shut, Richard emerged from his office, a smug, satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He leaned against my cubicle wall, crossing his arms. "You know, Mark," he said, loud enough for the whole floor to hear, "the problem with old dogs is they forget who the master is." A few heads snapped up, then quickly ducked back down. My hands didn't stop moving. I placed the box on the floor, straightened up, and looked him directly in the eye. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. He'd expected me to be broken. Instead, I gave him a small, tight smile. "The thing about numbers, Richard," I said, my voice perfectly level, "is that they always have the final say." His smirk faltered, replaced by a shadow of confusion. He didn't understand. He couldn't. To him, this was just a power play he'd won. He had no concept of the larger game already in motion. The walk to the elevators was the longest of my life. A gauntlet of silence. Every footstep echoed. Dave swiped his master keycard, and the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime that sounded like a death knell. Inside, the other guard took my employee badge without a word, the plastic ID that had been a part of my identity for a decade and a half. As the doors closed, I saw Richard through the glass, still standing by my empty desk, a look of triumphant arrogance on his face. He thought he was watching a man fall. He had no idea he was witnessing the arming of a bomb, and he was standing right on top of it. The lobby was a blur. Dave walked me to the revolving doors. "Sorry about this, man," he mumbled. "You're just doing your job, Dave," I replied, and I meant it. Then I was outside, on the bustling Chicago sidewalk. The cold November wind hit my face. The roar of the city sounded different now, not like the background noise to my ambition, but like the opening chords of a reckoning. I pulled out my phone. One new notification. A simple, 2-word email reply from Jonathan Sterling's personal account. It read, "Stand by." I slid the phone back into my pocket, the 2 words from Sterling burning a hole in the fabric. Stand by. It wasn't a question, it was a command. A promise of imminent action. For the first time all day, the raw Chicago wind didn't feel so cold. I didn't feel anger or panic. I felt a strange, chilling clarity, the kind you get just before a storm breaks. I hailed a cab, the box of my professional life resting on my lap. Richard thought he'd cut me out. He didn't realize he'd just freed me from the rules he lived by. Walking through my front door in the middle of a Tuesday was jarring. My wife, Sarah, was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters. Her welcoming smile vanished the second she saw the cardboard box in my hands. "Mark, what on earth?" I set the box down by the stairs, the sound echoing in the quiet house. "Richard fired me." Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. What? After 15 years? Is this about that proposal you were worried about?" I nodded, keeping my voice steady, level. "He made a $7 million error. I found it, I fixed it. He couldn't handle being exposed." "We'll fight this!" Her voice was a mixture of fury and fear, the emotions I should have been feeling. "We'll call a lawyer, we'll go to HR, we'll tell them what a fraud he is." I walked over and took her hands in mine. They were trembling. "Sarah, look at me." Her gaze, full of worry for our mortgage, for our daughter, met mine. "I need you to trust me. I've already set things in motion. This isn't over, not by a long shot." "What did you do?" she whispered, searching my face for answers. "I made sure the right person saw the truth," I said, choosing my words carefully. "The only person who matters. Now we just have to wait." The rest of the day was an exercise in forced normalcy. I helped my daughter with her math homework, the familiar logic of fractions, a strange comfort against the chaos. We ate dinner together, the clinking of silverware on plates feeling unnaturally loud in the tense silence. Through it all, my phone sat on the kitchen counter, face down. A silent black monolith. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I knew the first move wasn't mine to make. At 7:42 p.m. it buzzed, a sharp vibration against the granite. I walked over and glanced at the screen. Not a call, a text. It was from Ben Carter, one of the junior analysts on my team. A good kid I'd personally mentored. A kid who was usually terrified of his own shadow. The text was 4 words, but they were a shockwave. "They're walking him out." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over Ben's message. 4 words. A digital epitaph for a man's career. I turned the phone around and showed Sarah. Her eyes scanned the text, and a shaky breath escaped her lips. The fury in her expression dissolved into wide-eyed, stunned silence. They fired him?" she whispered, as if saying it too loud might reverse it. "Because of your email?" "Because he lied," I corrected her gently, "and he got caught. Sterling doesn't tolerate liars." The vibration in my pocket was different this time. Not a text, a call. The screen lit up with a string of zeros. A blocked, untraceable number. My heart didn't race. It steadied. The final piece was moving into place. I gave Sarah a reassuring look, a silent, "It's time," and walked into my home office, closing the door behind me. I took a breath and answered. "Sullivan." The voice on the other end was exactly as I remembered it from that boardroom 9 years ago, quiet, devoid of emotion, and heavy as a block of granite. "Richard Taylor is no longer with this firm," Jonathan Sterling said. There was no preamble, no greeting. "I have both versions of the Apex proposal on my desk. The $7 million discrepancy is self-evident. Now you're going to tell me what I'm not seeing." It wasn't a question, it was a command. This was my moment. This was the elevator. Richard thought the fight was about a single error, about his ego. He never understood the real battlefield. "The $7 million was just the symptom, Mr. Sterling." I began, my voice as calm and level as his. "The real problem, the one that would have cost this firm the entire Apex account, is in Section 4, subparagraph B of their client agreement. The volatility trigger." Silence on the line, not impatience. He was listening. "Apex has a zero-tolerance clause for portfolios exceeding a 1.2 risk rating in their tech sector holdings for more than a single quarter," I continued, the words flowing from memory. Richard's proposal didn't just get the numbers wrong. It funneled the new capital into assets that would have tripped that trigger by Christmas. It was more than careless. It was a contractual breach waiting to happen. My version not only corrected the capital error, it rebalanced the portfolio to stay a full 10 points below the trigger. His version would have gotten us fired. Mine secures them for another decade. The silence stretched longer this time. I could almost hear the gears turning, the cold calculation happening hundreds of miles away in New York. I had just shown him that this wasn't about catching a typo. This was about understanding the fundamental architecture of our most important client relationships. An architecture Richard had tried to demolish with a sledgehammer. Richard's ego was a liability I could no longer afford. Sterling finally said, his voice unchanged. "His office on the 45th floor is empty. I need a new head of consulting in Chicago. Someone who understands that our business isn't about numbers, it's about integrity. The job is yours if you want it." There it was, the offer, vindication, justice, everything I'd been waiting for. It would have been so easy to say yes, to feel the wave of relief and victory wash over me. But Richard wasn't the only problem in the Chicago office. He was just the loudest. The culture of fear and blame he'd created had seeped into the walls. Taking his chair wasn't enough. I had to tear down the whole rotten structure. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," I said, my grip tightening on the phone. "I accept, but I have a condition." A pause. I had his attention. This isn't just about one bad manager. Richard promoted people based on loyalty, not merit. He silenced my best analysts and rewarded his yes-men. My team, the people who actually do the work that makes this firm money, have been demoralized and ignored for 3 years. If I come back, it's not just to fill a chair. I need your word that I have full autonomy to rebuild the Chicago division. My team, my structure, my standards. No oversight committee, no red tape from New York. You give me the keys, and I'll give you back the most profitable consulting branch in the country. You hamstring me, and the rot Richard started will remain. It was the biggest gamble of my life. I wasn't just asking for a promotion. I was demanding power. I was telling the Emperor that his prized legion was broken, and only I could fix it. I held my breath, the silence on the line stretching into an eternity. For a terrifying second, I thought I had overplayed my hand. Then, I heard it. A sound so unexpected, it almost made me drop the phone. A short, dry chuckle. "The numbers don't lie, Sullivan," Jonathan Sterling said, and for the first time I heard something other than iron in his voice. It sounded like respect. "And it seems neither do you. The division is yours. Don't make me regret it." The line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, the silence of the room rushing back in. It was done. The trap had been sprung, the target eliminated, and the territory secured. I opened the office door. Sarah was standing right there, her hands clasped together, her face a mask of anxious hope. She didn't have to ask. She saw the answer in my eyes. "What happened?" she breathed. I allowed myself a small, sharp smile, the first genuine smile of the day. "Richard's gone," I said, "and I'm going back, not to my old desk." I looked past her, toward the window and the distant Chicago skyline, where the lights of the Sterling Vanguard Tower burned brightly against the night. "I'm taking his office." The revolving doors of the Sterling Vanguard Tower felt different the next morning. Yesterday they had expelled me in shame. Today, they welcomed me to war. Dave was at the security desk, his posture stiffening the moment he saw me. His hand instinctively went to the radio on his belt. "Mark," he started, his voice a low warning. "I can't let you past this desk, you know that." I stopped a few feet away, not with aggression, but with an unnerving calm. "It's all right, Dave. I'm expected." His eyes narrowed in disbelief. Right on cue, the private line on his desk buzzed, a direct call from building administration. He snatched the receiver, listened, and I watched the color drain from his face. His whole body seemed to shrink as the professional mask of authority crumbled into sheer, dumbfounded awe. He hung up the phone without a word, fumbled beneath the counter, and slid a brand new temporary access card across the marble. The name on it read, Mark Sullivan, Head of Consulting, Floor 45. "Welcome back, Mr. Sullivan," he stammered, his gaze fixed somewhere on my tie. "My apologies." I simply nodded, took the card, and walked to the elevator bank. The ride up was a silent, vertical journey of vindication. 48 hours ago, this same elevator had carried me down, a failure in a cardboard box. Now, as the numbers climbed, I could feel the power shifting, the world reorienting itself around a new center of gravity. The chime for the 45th floor was the bell for a new round, and I was the only one in the ring. When the doors opened, the effect was instantaneous. The low hum of commerce, the typing, the quiet phone calls, the rustle of paper, died as if a switch had been thrown. A wave of silence radiated out from the elevator bay. 100 heads turned. 100 conversations died in throats. They saw me, not in yesterday's rumpled suit, but in a fresh, sharp charcoal gray, the temporary access card clipped to my jacket. My gaze swept the room, cataloging the reactions. Fear, from the sycophants Richard had promoted. Confusion, from the rank and file. And in the eyes of my old team, a dawning, electrifying spark of hope. Todd, Richard's most vocal yes-man, was holding court by the coffee machine, a smug grin plastered on his face. The grin dissolved when he saw me, replaced by a sneer of disbelief. "Sullivan? I thought they took out the trash. Somebody call security." His voice, usually booming with unearned authority, sounded thin and reedy in the dead silence. No one moved. I began to walk, my footsteps echoing on the polished concrete floor. I walked past my old, empty cubicle without a glance. I walked past the stunned faces of analysts who had avoided my eyes yesterday. My destination was the glass-walled corner office at the far end of the floor. Richard's office. I stopped at the door and turned to face the room. My eyes found Todd. "Richard is gone," I announced, my voice perfectly level but carrying to every corner. It was not a boast. It was a statement of fact, cold and absolute. I then looked directly at Todd. "His last official act was to put you in charge of the Apex account. That was his final mistake." I turned and pushed open the door to my new office. The view of the Chicago skyline was breathtaking, a panorama of steel and glass that spoke of power and ambition. The desk was empty, wiped clean, except for a small, silver Newton's cradle. A toy. I picked it up, the cool, heavy spheres resting in my palm. Then I walked back out. The entire floor was watching, a captive audience to a drama they didn't understand. I walked straight to Todd's desk and placed the Newton's cradle squarely on his keyboard with a soft, definitive clack. "A gift," I said, my voice low enough so only he and those nearby could hear. "A reminder of cause and effect. You hitched your career to a liar. That was the cause." I leaned in closer. "This is the effect. Pack your things. HR is waiting for you in the lobby." His face went white. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I straightened up and addressed my old team, the ones who had suffered under Richard's reign. "Ben, Maria, Sarah." "My office," I said, my voice now ringing with command. 5 minutes. I didn't wait to see their reactions. I walked back into the corner office and shut the door. The silence on the floor broke, erupting into a flurry of frantic whispers. A moment later, my team filed in, their expressions a mix of shock and cautious optimism. They stood awkwardly, as if entering a lion's den. I came around the desk and stood with them, not behind it. "There's going to be a lot of talk," I began. "Ignore it. The era of politics and personality is over. From this moment on, the only thing that matters in this office is the work." I let the words hang in the air, a stark contrast to the political games they've been forced to play. Your name goes on what you produce. Credit will be given where it is due, and blame will be shouldered by the person who earned it. Starting with me. I looked at Ben, the youngest analyst, who still seemed unsure if he was about to be promoted or fired. "Ben, your text last night, that took courage. Richard's system punished people for speaking up. Our system will reward it. You're now lead analyst on the Kensington merger. I need your eyes on it." Ben's jaw practically hit the floor. He just nodded, speechless. I turned to Maria, a brilliant strategist Richard had consistently sidelined. "Maria, that predictive risk model you built, the one Richard called too complicated? I want it running on every portfolio by Friday. It's the new standard." A flicker of defiance, long suppressed, lit up her eyes. "It'll be ready by Thursday," she said, her voice firm. "Good," I said, a genuine smile touching my lips. "Because our first job is to undo the damage. I want a full forensic audit of every major account Richard managed personally. We hunt for every shortcut, every fudged number, every promise made that we can't keep. We are going to rip this division down to the studs and rebuild it on a foundation of absolute integrity. I leaned against the edge of the massive mahogany desk, Richard's former throne, making it clear I wasn't ruling from behind it. It's going to be a brutal quarter, long nights, hard work, no more easy answers or deflecting blame. But when we are through, no one in this company from New York to Hong Kong will ever question the work that comes out of Chicago again. I paused, meeting each of their gazes. The fear was gone, replaced by a steely resolve I hadn't seen in years. They weren't just my employees anymore. They were my allies. He tried to make us believe that power was everything, I said, my voice dropping to a quiet, intense level. He was wrong. The truth is everything. Now, let's get to work. They filed out not with the shuffling deference of before, but with a new energy, a shared purpose. The battle against Richard was over. The war for the soul of the company had just begun. And for the first time in a long time, I knew we were going to win. Was it petty to send both versions to the CEO, or was it perfectly justified? Let me know where you stand on this.